Welcome back to the Divorce and Money podcast. I am your host, Gabriella Martinelli, and I am really excited about today's episode. It's Halloween, and that makes it the perfect time for us to do something a little different. We're sharing divorce financial horror stories from the trenches. And I'm not going to do this alone. I am joined by two incredible colleagues and friends, both fellow CDFAs, Certified Divorce Financial Analysts, who run their own firms and who share my passion for raising the bar in this field. The three of us are also the co-founders of the Divorce Financial Planning Collective. This is a new organization we created to train, mentor, and support other divorce financial planners. We believe collaborations makes us stronger. The more skilled and informed we are as professionals, the better we can serve the people who rely on us during one of their life's most financially, emotionally challenging transitions. Marriage is about love. Divorce is about money. Without the right guidance, critical mistakes can have lasting financial consequences. That is where I come in. My name is Gabriella Martinelli, founder at Ever After Wealth. As a certified divorce financial analyst, I provide my clients financial clarity, strategic divorce planning, and long-term stability. On this podcast, I am sharing what you need to know about getting through a divorce, protecting your legacy, growing your wealth and assets post-divorce, and figuring it out what you really want in this next stage of life. Let's get started. So today's conversations is going to be a mix of real stories, the good, the bad, and the truly frightening. And we'll start with the really scary ones, cases that went sideways when people went through the divorce process without one of us, a certified divorce financial analyst, guiding them or even listening to our advice. Then we will shift to the success stories where strategy, clarity, and teamwork turn potential disasters into powerful outcomes. Because here is what we really want you to take away from this. We are truly experts. We are advocates, and above all, we are strategists. We help people make clear, confident financial decisions when everything feels uncertain. So let me introduce my guests. My first guest is Rhonda Noordyk. She is the founder of the Women's Financial Wellness Center and a nationally recognized financial advocate for women. Rhonda, why don't you tell us a little bit about you and who you serve?
Yeah, well, first of all, Gabriella, thank you so much for the opportunity to share. So I have been doing this work actually 11 years as of this month. And it was scary leaving the financial industry to open up my own company. But I decided I wanted to plant my flag and work with women. And as I'm talking to people, a lot of times people would say, well, Rhonda, what about the men? And I say, hey, I don't hate men. But the reality of it is I know where my passion is, and that's empowering the women. So here we are 11 years later. I have a top podcast called Disrupting Divorce, Conversations for Women. I have one of the top CDFA practices in the country, and I'm just super passionate to be able to align myself with other amazing heart-centered CDFAs that have an immense amount of integrity. So the collaboration has been absolutely rewarding.
Yeah, and we're so happy that you're here, by the way. And now I'm going to introduce our next guest, which is joining us today. And actually, he is rejoining us. This is Gerard Zielinski. Gerard is a divorce financial analyst and quadro specialist at Smarter Divorce Solutions. If you caught his last episode, I think it was episode 5 of the podcast, you might remember our deep dive into dividend retirement accounts and how easily people can make irreversible mistakes if they don't have the right guidance. Gerald's knowledge in this area is second to none, and I am thrilled to have him back for this conversation. Gerard, welcome back. And for those that did not catch that first episode, tell us a little bit about your work, please.
Thank you for having me. And so I am a CDFA as well. I've been at this 20 years helping folks going through the divorce process in a lot of different roles. I do mediation as a neutral financial specialist. I also advocate for clients as an expert witness, but my primary focus right now is dividing and valuing retirement assets in divorce. So I primarily focus on quadros, qualified domestic relations orders, and pension valuations. And I do that for attorneys, for clients, and other professionals that work in the divorce process. So
Yeah, and we know how important those are. We need someone like you, that's for sure. So, all right, let's dive into the scary part. Each of us is going to share a real case, a horror story of some sort where things went wrong because the CDFA was not involved in the process, or sometimes because they didn't listen to the CDFA. That happens sometimes. These are cautionary tales about what can happen when people try to navigate this complexity of financial division during divorce without the right expertise, right? So, Rhonda, why don't you kick us off and share your story?
So there's a lot of these, unfortunately, right? And so we kind of had to curate our list. But the one that I selected is this is a gal named Dina, and she actually, I'd been working with her throughout the process, and they were getting toward the end, and they had gone through discovery, and the big question mark was about the pension. And Gerard, I know this will definitely resonate with you as well. But it was huge because basically they were saying if, as, and when there is a pension, then it will get divided. And the problem with that was he was saying there wasn't a pension. I was saying, how do we know for sure there isn't one? And it was at a large company here in Wisconsin at GE Healthcare. And from previous clients, I knew they had a pension. And so I said, this is just not sitting well with me because as we know, right, or as we may not know, but we now know, right, after this conversation, is that if something happened to her ex-spouse without that pension being split, she does not get access to it. So if they retire, how does she know if there's a pension? It still doesn't answer that question. And what if he dies? And that really was keeping me up at night. So I was, at the time, office sharing with this particular attorney, walked into his office and said, I just can't let this go. And they had already signed the marital settlement agreement paperwork. And I said, I really want you to reach out to the HR department at GE Healthcare and get a denial letter if they don't have a pension. And so he did that. A short time later, he said, hey, Rhonda, I've got some news for you. And I said, what's that? And he said, there was actually a pension. And he said, and I know you were being a pain in the ass about it. I'm like, you can call me whatever you want, but that thing needs to be split. So they then had to go back and amend the marital settlement agreement. And what does that mean for the client, right? I always think, okay, it's not about the numbers, the zeros in the bank account. It's about the dollars. What impact is this going to have for the client? And this was, at the time, this was several years ago, to the tune of about $120,000 that was going to be left on the table had we not done it properly. And so I always tell people, like, there's usually a few things that people are engaging as they're doing this process that I see a lot. And I call it the DAM method. It's they dodge the disclosure, they avoid getting assets valued, and they misrepresent information. And they were engaging in all three of these things. And unfortunately, the attorney really wasn't helping. And had the client come back later, right, there could have been some significant issues with the attorney that we were able to mitigate. So that was a huge win at the end of the day. But it started as a very scary story.
Well, it could have been a very scary story if you would not have been there, right? Like, let's think about the money that she had lost if you didn't insist that there was a pension. And honestly, on top of that, the fact that they were able to amend the agreement, because once you had signed those documents, everyone has to be in agreement to modify it. This could have been like the husband saying, I don't care. I'm not going to sign this. And then you have to go through litigation. You have to file a law and then whether a judge is going to set that aside or not, right? Like it's not time and it's money and it's all of the in between because individuals don't really know what they are missing or what they don't know, right?
Yeah. And like, I know that at the end, right, this one did have a happy ending, thankfully, but it was not a happy ending. I mean, initially, right? Like it was, and again, the clients don't always know what that means for them. And so, we just looked at the exposed risk and really were able to make that a little less or a lot less scary.
A lot less, probably. Yeah.
I think I have a horror story here that piggybacks off of what Rhonda was talking about a little bit, because I see the divisions of these retirement accounts. I see the divorce decrees once they're drafted and negotiated. and they're talking about the division and how these accounts should be divided. And I think the horror stories that come from not understanding the terms and conditions of these plans, or not understanding the requirements to divide these certain pensions, assets, or 401ks, all of the requirements are different. And to leave that out of your divorce decree, it creates horror story upon horror story upon horror story. Just for an example, just a simple example, right? We have to address market fluctuations and the valuation date on the division of a 401k. Well, if you just put into your decree that the 401k will be divided in half, we don't know what date that's supposed to be divided in half as of. We don't know if market fluctuations are included. And what it leads to is future litigation. It leads to future problems, right? Your decree is done. The attorneys have washed their hands of everything. Now you're trying to get your 401k divided, and we have to answer all of these questions that are going to affect how much you get, right? And so now that's what creates the horror story, right? We don't have anything in our decree. We have to go back to the attorneys. We may have to go back to the judge and the court to settle this. We have to, worry about the time that is passing in between when this was supposed to be divided and now it's not getting divided, right? So there are other issues that can pop up. Another very, very common one with what Rhonda was mentioning with pensions, right? Now we know we've got a pension and we have to divide it. And what we see in a lot of decrees is divide the pension in half, period. We're just going to divide it in half. Well, what about what happens when somebody dies, right? What happens to these pension payments, which is a lifetime asset, right? We're talking about a lifetime payment. And when we divide it, we're usually trying to secure, or we're supposed to be securing, those lifetime payments for these former spouses. If we just divide the pension in half and we put no mention in our decree if this is going to be an independent interest or if survivor benefits are included, we've just left these clients hanging out to dry. And the worst of the worst horror stories, those pension payments stop upon the death of the participant, right? So we don't know that there's a horror story sitting out there until 20 years later and a participant dies, and now our former spouse loses all of their income or those pension payments from that pension plans, right? So those are where the horror stories come from, I would say, in drafting decrees, knowing these terms and conditions, having all of that information out in front while you're negotiating, while you're drafting these decrees, because it turns into the worst of the worst horror stories. I see those every day.
Yeah, and I think we talk about this too. The plan administrator has their own rules. And I think this is a little bit of the attorney thinking, I'm going to get a court order that says we divide this pension, we divide this 401k, and they think it's going to happen because there's a court order that says so. And unfortunately, that court order is not going to dictate what the plan administrator has set up for that particular account, or where the funds are being kept, right? Because, you have the Fidelities of the world and you have the Raymond James of the world. They have their own rules. They do their own thing. And this court order from divorce court does nothing from them. And if you don't tackle this ahead of time, before you get that court order, you're putting your clients in a lot of danger of not getting the money or getting less money or whatever can happen in the between, and also spending more money. I think that we are always forgetting about this costs money.
Right.
These people has their lives that have been on hold for a minute, and it costs a lot of money to do this. And this is not my horror story, but it just came to me because it just happened. A few months ago, I testified in court. These individuals had, I think it was like almost 8 or 9 retirement accounts together, right? 8 or 9 retirement accounts. There's a lot of accounts to be divided. In my testimony, I try to explain to the judge how it would be better to set them off so we don't divide 8 accounts, right? They're the same type of accounts. There's the same restrictions. So it was almost like dividing apples to apples. It was the same thing. And I mentioned the cost, right? You have to draft a quadros or DROs, depending with the IRAs. And I said, my advice would be let's equalize them and maybe divide 1 or 2, right? Because that is cost efficient, time efficient. We can make it happen. There was no expert on the other side. Nobody challenged basically my statement to the court. Like what I said, nobody challenged. Everybody was like, okay, that sounds fair. The interesting part about this is the judge issued an order mention me in the pleading in her order, mention what I said in my testimony, and order every single account to be divided 50-50.
Yep.
And I could not believe it. And I'm like, oh my God. So now, of course, I called Gerard. I said, well, Gerard, we have to divide 8 accounts. Like, that costs a lot of money. It takes longer, right? Because you need to see every company, every plan. And I was there thinking, like, wait a minute, I'm the expert. She mentioned I was the expert. She heard very clearly my testimony, but then she did it differently, which at the end of the day, the only people that are this is going to cost you is the individuals going through the process, not me, not the judge.
Exactly. No, and Gerard and I had something similar. A case in Illinois, they did the same thing. They just cut them all in half. Gerard then had 6 or 7, right, retirement accounts that he had to quadro or do DROs to. And at the end of the day, I mean, we're talking thousands of dollars. And Gerard, again, there's a way to do that in a better way, right? And it was a big pain and a headache that really just wasn't necessary. But I think they default to what they know, which is, well, I just feel like it has to be fair. And so I don't understand them. I'm just going to divide them all in half.
The judges in the courts, right? The attorneys in the courts and the judges, they don't understand these numbers. They don't look at numbers every day. They are not numbers people, right? And so when you look at and talk about equalizing, right? We talk about taking all of these accounts and dividing only 2. We're treating all of those accounts as if they're fluctuating the same, as if they're acting the same, as if they're, the same type of asset, and they may not be, right? And so a court and these attorneys, they default to division, divide it in half, because that's the only way they know it gets divided in half or equally, right? Equitably. If we start offsetting and dividing 1 or 2, that's where there is a little bit of inequity, but most parties are okay with that if they're educated properly, right? If we talk about why we're equalizing, if we talk about the differences in these accounts and maybe some of the tax differences or whatever, what have you, they're okay with equalizing and using those approaches because they do make sense, right? Equalizing makes sense versus dividing 8 different retirement accounts. But Rhonda, to your point, I see it more often than not. If you get it to an attorney who doesn't understand numbers, or it goes all the way to a judge, they're just going to split them up. It doesn't matter what we say as experts, because they don't want to stick their neck out on the line, right? Those people are going to be back in court 2 years later because there was inequities with an offset that nobody was educated on, that nobody knew about, that, one account was fluctuating much more better than the other, right? And we only divided one of the 2, right? And so they hear those stories and the court won't stick their neck out. And I think that's where we come into play in the education piece. You hire us beforehand, we get educated, and now both parties can make some informed decisions versus having the judge make that decision.
And I think the other part too, right, is like, you have to know there's a balance to this stuff, right? I've always said, like, this is a art just as much as it is a science, because every situation is going to be unique. People are paying us to think. Right? I mean, that's essentially what we're getting paid for, is to use our brain, use our critical thinking skills to come up with solutions. And that's why this is so important, because I think at the end of the day, it isn't totally straightforward. It is not black and white. Everything at the end of the day is negotiable. And knowledge does not equal wisdom, right? The knowledge of, okay, and how can we as experts, right, as people in the field, make it so simple, whether it's charts, graphs. I mean, again, like, we have this multi-pronged approach of education. It's educating the client and then all of the other parties. But how can we make it as simple as possible? Because I think the chances of them understanding it are that much greater.
Yeah, I agree. And I want to go a little bit further, and I'm going to share my story. My story is a horror story, and it doesn't have a happy ending, this first one. And I think it's very important that we bring this up, because this happens a lot. It happens often, and I know it happened to us, and I know it happens to a lot of other CDFAs out there. And this was sad to me. This lady, she called me. Now it's been like 3 years ago. Let's call her Sarah. Sarah called me, and she was very confused. She had a very long-term marriage where she had no knowledge of the finances. Right, this is one of those where the husband was controlling everything. And Rhonda, I know you've seen this plenty of times, and she didn't understand. She knew that something was being hidden. She knew there was money going out of the country, accounts, properties, even LLCs, companies that were open out there, whether they were shell companies or not. She didn't get that far. She couldn't. She didn't know. She didn't understand. She knew she needed help. She reached out to me. She felt that I could give her some guidance, right? I explained to her she didn't need a CPA, an accountant to do some forensic work. We can do that. We're trained to do that. And we do it within the realm of the divorce. So before she could start working with me, she went back to her attorney, and she was told by her attorney that they could handle all of her financial questions in-house, that she didn't need me or any other expert for that matter, that they were going to do all of this for her. She sends me a very apologetic email and very nice email saying how she really want to work with me, but she was unaware that her attorney could help her with the financial side of things. And that was it. 2 years later, Sarah calls me back and tells me how 6 months after she was working with this attorney, the attorney fired her and told her that it was too complex for his firm, that even though he had experience, he didn't have experience in this complexity and he couldn't help her. So he fired her after 6 months. She had to go find another attorney, which in turn did the same exact thing. Told her, oh, we've done this for 30 years. We know everything about finances. We're going to help you figure this out. We got you. After 2 years, when she called me, she was on her third attorney that finally told her, I don't know anything about this. We may need to get some other help. But this is the caveat. 2 years had gone by. She had no more money because she didn't get any money, because the case didn't move forward, because she was paying these attorneys thousands and thousands of dollars, and we know how expensive attorneys are. And the two previous attorneys told her that they could help her, and she paid thousands thinking this was happening. And by the time she reached out back to me, she didn't have money. And also, can we appreciate how hard it would have been for us to go back? Like, I had to go back to before the separation, right? To find out what the money was and what money was there. And then what happened to that the last 2 years? Because she had no access and he had all the control. So I honestly felt so heartbroken for her, because the person that should have been honest with her and understanding that you need an expert, let's bring as many experts as we can to help with you to figure out this puzzle, told her no. And she trusted that expert, right? Because why wouldn't you? I almost feel like that is the other flip when people tell me, do I need an attorney? And my response, of course, is yes, you need an attorney. I'm not an attorney. I'm going to help you with the numbers, but you need the attorney to handle the legal side. So how often do you see this? Because I see this constantly. The majority of the women, unfortunately, that are told this by their attorneys, and then they don't have the true expertise they need in this process. And when they realize that it's too late, because now you don't have money, they can hire me, I can help them. And even if they hire me, my work would be like 10 times more complicated than it was going to be in the beginning if she would have hired me and I could have worked with her attorney. So it baffles me sometimes how these things keep happening and happening, because I know we are out there. We are literally the divorce financial experts, and we're still having to find the stories where people either are told they don't need us, they decide they don't need us, and then this was truly a horror story for me. I felt heartbroken for her. I honestly did. It's hard. I'm really sometimes out of words as to how this happened, because the only person that paid the price was her. And this new attorney, the third one, was saying, maybe you're better off accepting the offer on the table.
Exactly.
And, right?
I mean, that's the kind of stuff, though, Gabriella. Like, and it kind of makes me think of, again, unfortunately, Sarah's story is way too common. And you're exactly right. I have said from the very beginning, and I know I'm in shared company in this sentiment, and that is, if I lose the passion for truly doing what's right for the client, and I don't mean like just saying it words wise, I mean walking the walk and talking the talk, it's time for me to do something else. Because at the end of the day, whether you're playing the role of a neutral or an advocate, we have a responsibility to do what's in the client's best interest. And I know the three of us that are on this call are doing our CDFA work exclusively independent of financial product sales. That was part of the reason why I left 11 years ago was A, I saw the need, and B, I really felt like I wanted to be able to have that firewall. Can I share a quick story, kind of piggybacking off of what you shared?
This is the story episode. So yes, share the story.
Yes. So, working with a client in Texas, and this gal had an attorney. She was told, "Oh, don't worry, we work with, high conflict situations." And at the end of the day, he was basically just as bad, right? Controlling the situation, meaning the attorney, right? And she was sold a bill of goods. And I think we need to start, having people say, okay, give me an example of a case that you've worked on where it was high conflict and what the result was. Give me an example, and push the attorneys a little bit in that regard. But long story short, she came to me, had an attorney. She decided that she wanted to switch attorneys, which I was on board with, because I spent an hour and a half on the phone with him and got 3 words in. Like it was all about him. This woman went back to work, right? She took the initiative. She went back to work working for a nonprofit. She was making about $90,000 a year, which was not a bad salary, right? So they used the $90,000 to calculate support, and they had one daughter, teenage daughter, and so she was getting X amount for support. But here's the kicker. 6 months into her new job, she was really feeling unsettled because she knew that her divorce was really taking a toll on her, but she wanted to show up in the best way possible and reached out to HR to have a conversation about, hey, what can I do, right? I maybe need to take a little time off. I need to whatever. And long story short, they ended up coming in and letting her go. The problem with that was twofold. One, support calculations did not get changed based on her making $90,000 and now her making $0. Number two, the second attorney that she hired said, well, yeah, his strategy all along was that she was going to get half of the equity in the home. The problem with that was it was a multi-7-figure home, was not going to be flying off the market. She had no access to cash. She hired a forensic accountant because she wanted to do some tracing. The attorney never used the report. But the last one that was so bad was that the company that she was working for that let her go came back and said, we are going to offer you a settlement so that you don't actually come after us for wrongful termination. We'll give you $10,000 and you sign off. And her attorney said yes. Now, there were several things in that situation that just happened without me being able to say, okay, let's talk through this, right? The forensic piece. I don't know about you guys, but you'd have to pay me more than $10,000 to not talk. Especially when you end up owing the attorney $150,000.
Right.
Multiple mediations that failed. And he felt like he did a good job for her because she walked away with 2 illiquid assets and a measly child support payment and no alimony.
Wow. Yeah. Well, and I think, and that is the interesting part about this. And by the way, I don't work just with women. I live that to Rhonda, but I do work with some women. I work with mostly business owners, and I work with men. And there seems so simple for them. They pay thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to experts or to an attorney when they're not really receiving the support they need on the topics they need, right? Because the attorney may have been doing what he thought it was best from the legal point of view. You're getting your equitable or your 50-50, depending where you are, right? From the division. However, the liquidity portion is so important. But an attorney is not going to know that, right? And that's what we know. That's what we can explain, right?
Yeah.
Where is the information we're basing our decisions on, right? Where is that information coming from? It's coming from the experts, the advocates, right?
Yep. And they're not listening.
And if the attorneys don't have that information either, which most of them don't, they just hear what we're talking about and they go and make these decisions without having all the information, right? And yeah.
And it's so important because that's the other part. And like Rhonda mentioned, we're strategists. We're not just thinking all the time. We're thinking ahead of time. Like we're thinking about what's going to
Mm-hmm.
happen, which is very important for these individuals. Whether you were the stay-at-home parent and you need support and you try to get on your feet and try to figure out something for your life, or you are the business owner and you're trying to save your business, which, by the way, is good for everybody that the business stays alive and making money, right? Because the support is being paid. So I think that is a very important. When they pay us the money and they, on top of that, don't listen to us, that's just like crazy. I'll tell my clients, let me earn my money. Let me explain this to you. So, I kind of feel like I did something for the money you pay me.
Mm-hmm.
So, these were bad stories. Well, mine had a really bad ending, I guess. But the good news is that we have good stories, right? Or stories that we thought it were going to go down the wrong, and then we kind of saved the day, basically, because we came in all CDFA wonders here and help our clients. So I know those stories are there too. So what do you guys have for us?
It involves another attorney. I hate, throwing the attorneys under the buses here, but it involves another attorney who was actually fresh off their CDFA designation. So now we have an attorney out there advertising that they can do all of the financials for you. And I got a call from the opposing party. He had been kind of thrown under the bus himself, or maybe just thrown into a process. So he was in a neutral process with a neutral attorney who was also a CDFA. And they had a balance sheet with all of their assets on this balance sheet, and they were ready to sign on the dotted line. Here was my final settlement. He was asking me to review his balance sheet for him just to make sure everything was on the right page, looking good. And we were going to be dividing some retirement accounts. But that's why I got contacted. He said, check out this balance sheet. And within about 5 minutes, I noticed that, we had an employee who was a 30-year employee at this company, and their cash balance pension plan was only worth about $85,000. Right. And so right off the bat, my light bulb went on, thinking, hey, they have a pension and it's on this balance sheet for 85 grand, and they're 30 years in. That doesn't add up to me. Right. I mean, it's got to be worth more than that if they have a pension. So I did some digging, 5 minutes with this guy on the phone. He didn't even pay me at this point. It's 5 minutes with this guy on the phone, and I found that this pension plan had two portions, a part A and a part B. One of it was the cash balance portion, the part B. Part A was a grandfathered monthly benefit that had been earned over the first 20 years of his service. And it was, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a month at retirement that he was going to be, or she was going to be getting, wife was going to be getting from this pension. And they had no idea. They did not have it on the balance sheet. And so I raised my hand there, and the case did not get signed off and settled the next day. He went back and took it back to the parties, and ended up, we had to value that piece of the pension at over $300,000 that was not on the balance sheet. And he ended up getting half of that portion of the pension in the division, but a horror story avoided for sure for him. Just the expertise in dividing assets, understanding pensions, understanding retirement accounts. An attorney wasn't going to be able to do that. Even an attorney that just got their CDFA credentials wasn't going to be able to find that, or identify that. And again, that was $300,000 that they were ignoring. So
yeah, it's interesting, right? Like, and the concern there, right, is okay, what responsibility does the attorney have if it's found out later?
Yeah.
So great work, Gerard. I love that. Well, and here's the thing, right? Like when we do as many cases as we do, and this is all we do from this lens,
yes,
it doesn't, there might be times when it takes longer, but we can look at stuff and be like, okay, this is going to require a little bit more analysis, or, whatever.
Rhonda, you have a success story?
I do have a success story. I do. I have a lot of them, but there's so many. But this one was a recent one, working with a client, and her partner is in the financial industry. And so, having been in the financial industry, right, we know what questions to be asking. And I really wanted to get the business valued. I wasn't anticipating that it was going to be a ton of money, but what I was anticipating was she was going to say it was worth $0. So we had it valued, and the business valuation came back. And the bottom line was the attorney took the lower number accounting for goodwill, which again, we have to look at each state. This case was in Oregon. So is goodwill a factor? Is it not? And in this case, goodwill is a factor in Oregon. However, it's not our job to account for goodwill.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's their job. So that whole piece of it was part of the puzzle. And I was able to go back to the business valuation expert and say, here's my thought process on this. I think we do the higher number. We're not doing anything shady. It's 1 times revenue. Most financial practices, if they were larger in scale, are paying 3, 4, 5 times multiples with an upfront bonus to move your book. And there's half of her book of business that she isn't collecting revenue on, which again, we're not exactly sure why. Is it commissioned only products, et cetera? So kind of along those lines also. So that what we moved over 6 figures onto the balance sheet, getting ready to go to mediation here next week. And there was also a component around inheritance. So this particular individual had an inheritance. She moved it into a joint account and then moved it again. And then they moved some money out to buy a house. And, there's just like we see the tracing, right? So I went through, there was all these emails going back and forth. And finally, I'm like, I need a visual. Everybody is chiming in. I'm like, I need a visual. So I put together this really beautiful yet simple spreadsheet, but in a flow chart format. And the attorney has hired a financial paralegal, I guess you could say, to be working on stuff. And she kept saying, oh yeah, I'm going through stuff. And like most things, you get all of these statements and you're like, where are we even focusing? I'm like, we need 5 statements from all of these that's going to show us these specific, really important moves. And that's it. So was able to get it into a really nice format. I send the email, right, in preparation for mediation. And the response was, oh, I concur. This is exactly what I'm seeing too, which is great, except for the fact that we have mediation in 5 days and nobody could seem to put together some kind of a summary that's super simple that we can all go in there and be like, this makes total sense. And oh, by the way, her whole inheritance claim has been commingled 5 times over.
Oh no!
Since her claiming that it's now in her individual account. It's so simple, and we're talking $500,000 of her claim. That's crazy. So I'm excited about it's just, again, I'm masterful at taking something that's super complicated and be like, listen, okay, can we just make this more practical?
Not only practical, it's numbers. And I always say numbers don't lie. If you can just put them out there, you can organize them, they're there, they'll tell you a story. There's nothing you can do about them. They're there. You just had to be able to see them the way. And by the way, and I think it's funny you said the paralegal. I was a paralegal. I was a divorce paralegal for 15 years. And I can tell you that what I know about divorce now helps me immensely with my clients because I know the legal world. But what I know now as a CDFA and a divorce financial strategist, I could never have done that as a paralegal, even when I was a paralegal for 15 years. So the one thing doesn't amount to the other. That's why the expertise is so important.
That's right.
Because I was there. I worked the complex cases. We had experts at the time. And even though I was very involved, I know now today, I didn't know anything. I mean, I brought the legal expertise, but I didn't know anything about the financial expertise the way that you need it, basically.
Well, and we could say the same thing about leaving the financial industry, right? It took me 3 years, even after having been in the financial industry for 14 years, to actually get assimilated and understand the basics. This is not hey, I kind of sort of do a few cases on the side. Because you miss things.
Or I know what a 401k is, or I know what retirement accounts are, and so I can do it. No.
Yeah, because it's what you leave and breathe.
How are they valued in divorce? What are the tax effects? What are the risks of offsetting or dividing assets, right? Mm-hmm. All of those things go along with not just knowing financial, knowing numbers, right? I mean,
right.
Yeah.
And hoping to invest the assets on the back end. At the end of the day, that's the reality. And it's really doing a disservice to the clients if they're not doing this as their main thing. They're too, in my opinion, and I know I'm in shared company, this is a full-time job, just working on client cases for people that are going through divorce. Because even after 100%. Having done this as long as we have, apart from maybe you, Gerard, but the rest of us are still learning. And there isn't a day goes by that I'm
learning every day. Yep.
We're all learning.
Yeah.
We're always learning, but at the same time, right? Yeah. That's, I think it's important.
So my story is a little bit about that, my success story, and he talks about the expertise and the experts that are all navigating and swimming around these cases. This doctor came to me after 5 years of his divorce process going on. He was divorced. See, in North Carolina, you're able to get a divorce and then you continue with the division of assets and everything. You can be in your third marriage and still going to court for your first one division. But he was going for 5 years. He owned his medical practice, very complex case. The case had been scheduled for court and continue and delay, because experts and because of attorneys, and he did not know which way was up. His finances were stuck. He was in limbo for 5 years, right? Because when you're going through this process, there's nothing you can do, right? So he came to me. He's like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what to do. I'm like, okay, let's start from the beginning. I needed to get, familiar with there had already been 4 business valuations done on his practice because they had to do one with they separated, and every time they thought they were going to court, they had to do a new one, right? To update the valuation and then look into personal goodwill and how the court is going to look at the new value, etc. So because I was able to look in the court system, I realized he had like 7 experts that his attorney had been designed for his income, experts for the business, for his practice, experts for his budget and spending, experts that was going to review his ex-wife's spending, right, for support purposes. And I asked him, I said, okay, tell me about these experts. Have you talked to them? What's the strategy? What are we doing? And he tells me, I have not talked to one of them once. He was paying thousands of dollars to these experts that the attorney hired, and they did not have one phone call with him about his own finances, about what the strategy was going to be. He had no idea what they were going to testify of because the reports had never filed because they were continued, right? They did not talk to him about his practice. They conducted business valuations on his medical practice without talking to him. I mean, that is a big no-no. The first call should be with the business owner. The person that does the valuation has to understand this business, right? And every expert that was on the other side as well. Nobody had had a conversation with him. And he didn't have a lot of power, if you will, in this. So I started working with him behind the scenes. His attorney did not want to hear of him working with anybody else but the experts that he had hired. So we worked behind the scenes. I tried to help him. We went back into the numbers. I look at the possible options. This was bad for him and his ex-wife, right? This money is sitting there everywhere. The practice is not being divided. We need to come out with a plan. Everybody's lives is in limbo and on pause, right? Which a lot of times I wish that she was working with someone like me too, because I'm like, okay, let's just crunch the numbers together. Let's have a strategy and make this happen for these 2 individuals that are living in limbo for 5 years. Well, long story short, I helped him craft a potential settlement, okay? He had to push his attorney. His attorney would not send it to the other side. He had to say, this is my life. I need you to send this proposal to the other side. I need this conversation to get going. And finally, the attorney did it. They got a response. We walked through the response. We sent a counter offer. We worked like every step of the way. He had to push his attorney to send this to the other side. And I don't know what was happening on the other side, right? But these attorneys kept going with depositions and business valuations and things of that nature. Well, there was a settlement on the table and there was a possibility, right? There was a possibility of resolving this for everyone to have as fair as possible, but not fair. I don't like the word fair. A resolution that would put everyone on the right path to move forward with their lives. Like nobody could buy a house. Nobody could do anything. And finally he settled. We were together 5 months. I was behind the lines. And finally they settled. They settled like a week before the 10-day trial was about to start. 10 days trial. Do you imagine how much money they were going to spend, both of them? Because they had to pay their attorneys. They all had their own experts. 10 days of trial. And we literally resolved it. Like he was able to have a clear understanding of the finances, what he was looking into, what could be a good solution, because he didn't know. And by the way, this is a smart person, right? He's a doctor that owns his practice. He's been owning his practice for 20 years. He could comprehend numbers if someone will explain to him what this number look like in this divorce process. And it baffled me that he had all these experts that never talked to him. So I think it goes back to what we talk about. We are advocates and strategists. We are not just sitting there crunching numbers. We are working with our clients. We're explaining to them what the numbers mean, the options, the solutions, the advantages, disadvantages, but most like the options. Like a lot of these individuals are talking about millions of dollars and they still feel they don't have options because nobody explains us to them. Sitting across the table, meeting them eye to eye and say, okay, this is what these numbers mean. Let's craft your strategy during this process. And I think that's what's very important too, because then you have the advisors that are thinking about how they're going to invest the money or what they're going to do for them, which doesn't matter. What matters is what we're doing today to help you get some clarity and get back that power to make decisions in your life. Understanding, I think that's what's missing almost most of the time in this, and it's something that we bring to the table, right? Because we're not just experts, we're advocating, we're educating and giving people their power back, the power to handle these decisions and not feel that everyone is deciding what's happening here when it's their lives, like is and their finances are at stake. Do you feel that? I feel very strongly about that, because whether it's the business owner or the business owner's spouse, they are both powerless a lot of the times in this process because they don't have the strategist sitting with them, looking at the numbers and giving them options so they see possibilities.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I see that all the time too, Gabriella. And I think at the end of the day, even if they do have the experts that are generating the reports or whatever, it's like, okay, what does that mean? We're not just taking it at face value and how does that fit into the overall financial picture? But a lot of times I think people just want to check the boxes that it's been done.
I have folks come to me all the time and they'll be 1, 2, 3 years into the process. And the first thing I'll ask them, no matter what I'm doing for them, I'll ask them, oh, have you seen a balance sheet? Has anybody put a balance sheet in front of you with all your assets and the values of all your assets? No. Well, it's always the answer. 100%. I don't even know if there's even one time it's always the answer. No, I haven't seen anything like that. Nobody showed me anything like that. And I know right off the bat, how can you possibly know what your options are? How can you possibly say yes or no? How can you possibly even be talking about your assets and what we're going to do with them without understanding the big picture, without seeing the big picture, without understanding how they all fit together or don't, right? It's 10 out of 10, right?
Yeah.
They come to us and they don't have this stuff. They don't have any idea. It's the first time they've ever went through it. And the attorneys, they're not looking for that. They're not looking to help these two people get through the process. They're looking to advocate for their client from a legal perspective, right? They're looking to do their job by the book. Let's put it that way. I think we bring a little bit of a personal touch to it, to the process, I guess, a little bit of.
Yeah. Well, and think about it. I mean, I see these emails floating back and forth and I'm like, how can we, like, I'm confused. I'm like, right? Like, I'm like, holy cow!
Well,
like,
how many times
like
do we see
the dots are? I'm like, oh my gosh, you're exchanging what for what? Like, hold on, like.
Yes.
How many times do we see folks come to the table and they have it all figured out? Oh, Gerard, we already know what we're going to do here. We've got this figured out. We're going to do this, this, and this. And you kind of think to yourself, well, why are you calling, right? You got it all figured out. But you know right away what they don't know. And as soon as they hear what you have to say, things change and it's going to change. And, they don't have it figured out, right? They need the education. They need the understanding.
They need the strategy that fits them.
They do.
Right?
Yep.
So I'm going to say it again. We are experts and we're advocates and we're strategists. And we are the ones that are going to sit across the table from you. We're going to help you understand what's really happening with your money and what your options are and why some options are better than others for you when it comes to those financial decisions. And we basically are going to give these individuals their power back in a process that is really powerless for people. It's out of their control what happens in this process a lot of the time, and understanding and making decisions, I think, it can give you your power back during this time. So I know we ran out of time, and it always happens when the three of us are talking. We can talk forever. We have the stories, we have all the things. Before we go, please, how can people find each of you?
Sure. So my website is wfwcdivorce.com.
I'm going to give you my email. It's Gerard at smarterdivorcesolutions.com. My first name, Gerard, at smarterdivorcesolutions.com.
And we will put that on the notes. As always, you can find me through my website, everafterwealth.com, or email me at Gabriella at everafterwealth.com. Rhonda, Gerard, thank you so much for sharing your stories. You know, I wanted to do this for a very long time, and I feel I got my wish, and I got all of us here. So, and thank you so much for our listeners for joining us in this episode, this Halloween special. And remember, the scariest thing in your divorce is not truly the unknown, it's going through this alone without the right expertise. And you need a CDFA if you have any financial complex matter, or if you don't understand your finances, even though they tell you they're not complex. So thank you everyone for being here with us, and I'll see you next time on the Divorce and Money podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. If you're going through a separation or divorce, please contact me through my website at everafterwealth.com. I would love to be a resource and partner as you navigate this season and prepare for your financial future. I'll see you in the next episode.